The chat box is working. Everyone's sitting comfortably. We shall commence. So what is retrofit and how is it different to traditional construction or building practices? My name's Mark Crundon-White. I'm a retrofit assessor with People Powered Retrofit. So that means that I go out and assess people's houses, but not just the houses. We also assess the occupants themselves and their behaviours, wants, desires, budgets, etc., in order to give them a good sort of holistic retrofit plan as to how we can deal with the property. So what is that word retrofit? What we want to know is, what does retrofit mean to you? If you can share your answers in the chat, we'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, and Sandy will collate it. Hopefully most of you all know what it is, but we shall see. Did everyone get it right, Sandy?
Still waiting for people to pop answers in the chat, but hopefully people can share what they think it is. Okay, we've got one from Denise: fixing old buildings to make them energy efficient. Lindsay saying improving the energy efficiency of buildings. I'll read any more out that come in. Oh, installation of measures to make properties thermally proficient. Really good answers all around, I think. But yeah, keep putting them in the chat, and Mark, let's see what you think. Oh, changing a home or office to make it energy efficient. So energy efficiency, thermal efficiency, fixing old buildings, lots of different things.
Yeah, completely. Well, it's a number of different things, really. It could take a number of different forms. Essentially, it's like a blend, an abbreviated blend of two words, those words being retrospectively and fitting. So that gives us retrofit. But yeah, in our context, it's about energy efficiency measures to an existing building. What are retrofit works? They can take any number of forms, fabric being obviously one of the most important. So that could be repairs, improving air tightness or draft proofing, insulation being applied to areas such as walls, loft, roof, floors, replacement windows and doors. It can also be to do with the services, such as heating. So we have combi boilers, air source or ground source heat pumps, solar water heating or biomass boilers and stoves, and finally renewables such as solar PV arrays, battery storage, and in some cases wind turbines. So there's a number of different types of work that can happen to existing buildings. That's like the 4 R's, if you will. The first one being remodeling, which is altering the structure; refurbishment, which is improving it by cleaning, decorating, re-equipping, etc.; renovation, which is returning a structure to a good state of repair; and retrofitting, adding something new to an existing building, such as building systems, fabric upgrades, etc., etc. A retrofit project may include elements of each of these types of work. So people's motivations for getting different types of building work are obviously, they vary greatly. Remodeling could be something whereby somebody wants to knock through an internal wall, have more space, make a kitchen diner, that kind of thing. Refurbishment will be, as it says, improving, sort of just making aspects of the property better. Renovation, which could be returning a structure to a good state of repair following, I don't know, you could have had a leak or something like that, which has like ruined a load of things inside the property. So essentially that's bringing it back up to how it was before, if not better. And then obviously retrofitting, which is adding something new to the property. So with traditional building work, a lot of motivations could be like down to aesthetics, such as like, my kitchen looks quite dated, it's not fashionable anymore, I'd like to change that. Or again, it could be some repair work that's been that's needed. Whereas retrofit, people's motivations are different, and we have a graph here which is taken from a selection of our service users and what was that the aims of their retrofit project, why did they want to do it, etc. So as you can see at the top, we've got reduced carbon footprint, which is a big motivation. I mean, obviously our client base are quite well-informed people. We have improving comfort and warmth, which is a no-brainer really. There's no one who wants to be colder and less comfortable. Reducing fuel bills, that's another one which is obviously very important. So this is data from our service users from between November 21 and March 22. We had an event on at the weekend, and we asked people about their motivations, and the answers were again pretty similar. However, this time round, reducing fuel bills was pretty much on a parity with reducing the carbon footprint, which is obviously the cost of living crisis, fuel bills going through the roof, etc., etc. That's now a bigger motivation for a lot of people. So it's not without risks. In all honesty, we'd love to say it's simple. There's no silver bullet to making your house energy efficient without like intrusive and sometimes invasive works. Obviously, houses are made of any number of different elements, so they become a complex system. So the best practice for retrofit is a context specific and risk managed approach. Um, You've got to be aware of potential unintended consequences. It's all well and good being well intentioned. However, if you're well intentioned and put the wrong measures into the wrong property, then you're going to get issues, no matter your motivations for doing it. Any new measures must be well considered, well designed, well installed, and understood by the resident. You have issues where people have had air source heat pumps fitted, for instance, and the installers have said, whatever you do, don't touch it. So you have an immediate disconnect. So people have like shelled out a lot of money to have a new system put in. They're trying to do the best thing for their pocket and the planet, and they're being told not to use it. So it sort of alienates people from things and makes it seem, like a sort of far away, complicated thing, which it needn't be. People need to understand and be able to interact with things. Speaking of interactions, the diagram that you can see, the little wheel there, or the wheel of doom, as we refer to it sometimes, was created by the Sustainable Traditional Buildings Alliance. And essentially what it is you can go onto their website, and if you're considering retrofit work of any description, you can select what measures you're interested in, and then it will there show you the interactions with other building materials, other building parts, services, etc., and also any inherent risks with what you're considering. So well worth doing that in order to see what the unintended consequences could be. So retrofit does go wrong. It does have the potential to go very wrong in some cases, as it has done here. These are some houses that were done under a scheme in Preston some years ago. And as you can see, we've got serious damp, mold issues and what have you. But what could have caused this? I mean, any ideas? Does anyone know what might have happened in that particular instance? I'll give you a couple of minutes. If you can put your answers in the chat and we'll read them out in a minute.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on the chat. I wonder, Mark, do you want to pop back to the previous slide so people can have a bit more of a look at the pictures and think about what might have caused this? So someone's saying cold bridging, inadequate moisture barriers, insulation inside creating a damp trap, condensation within the wall, improper measures installed, materials that weren't suitable for the property. People really knowing a lot of things, ventilation issues. I'm really glad someone mentioned ventilation, increasing insulation without thinking about ventilation. Lots of different things. So around condensation, around damp, around badly fitted external wall insulation. I wonder if someone's read this.
I think so. I think one or two people might have done. No, but I mean,
why don't we lift the curtain, Mark?
Let's do this. Let's have a look at the grisly truth. No, I think everyone who came up with the response there, you were all right in one way, shape, or form. Essentially, it was a job done under a scheme. It looks like the builders weren't particularly well trained in the measures that they were supposed to be installing, and again, time and budget constraints. So, real issue with procurement in terms of where we have like short-term funding, initiatives that come along and everyone clamours around and a lot of work gets done in a short space of time, not maybe to the best standard. So you can see there's a number of things people mentioned. Cold bridging, you can see there the bottom left hand slide where we've got a flue, which is great. So they're not going to poison people by keeping the flue, sort of like they make sure it's unblocked. But by the same token, they're also allowing a load of cold bridging there between, behind the external wall insulation and into the property. If you look at the top right, you can see really poor detailing around the roof line where the external wall insulation's like it extended it. If you get a leak in that gutter, then obviously that material is just going to get absolutely sodden. Another problem as well we happen to know with these properties was, despite the age of them, they had in fact been filled with cavity wall insulation already. So you've already got a risk factor there where you're basically increasing the air tightness. People mentioned about ventilation as well. We've got interstitial condensation. So you've got moisture in the cavity. You've got possible water ingress from leaks, poorly detailed work around guttering, drains, etc., etc. So yeah, everybody was right, unfortunately. So in order to mitigate that, because there was that was one of quite a few sort of horror stories that came around in the the sort of mid 2010s. things have been put into place now mercifully. One of those of which is past 2035, which is a retrofit standard. So standards have now been agreed. That's the diagram you can see there to the right. Explain some about the interaction between all the different interested parties, as it were, in a retrofit project, from the householder through all sort of the designers to the builders, the contractors, etc. So that's past 2035 on the left. Sorry, on the right, and on the left we have LETI retrofit process. And we follow something along similar lines. I think most people do. The idea of it being is that prior to any work commencing, the house is thoroughly assessed, and it's not just assessed in terms of like what it can, what can be done to it. It's also assessed about how you can best work with it as opposed to against it. So that's using materials that aren't going to have a negative impact onto what's already at the property. Also ensuring best practice for installation, and most importantly now, what Sandy will get onto very shortly, is also having people who understand the measures that they're installing and also understand the best practice for the installation of said measures. So we've seen how it can be done badly, but now here's some examples of where it's done well. We have some properties here where you can see that external wall insulation has been applied, and all looks to be tickety-boo. I don't know much else about the properties, but we can give you some examples of clients of ours who've gone through our service and have had retrofit works carried out, and some of their responses. Here's Dom and Kirsten. After we did our first retrofit, even before fitting the air source heat pump, the house felt cozier. I didn't find myself grabbing a sweater as often. Before we did all these retrofit works, we had some rooms that were too cold in winter or too warm in summer. Now all the rooms are just right. And then Lorenza, Paul and Lyra also came in with it's cozier and our heating bills are much lower, but the thing we weren't expecting was the acoustic improvement. The windows helped cut out the extra noise of cars and other things from outside. Unfortunately, I'm just going to have to move my little box to be able to read the rest of this. From 2010 till 2016, our total energy usage in kilowatt hours reduced from 9,000 to just over 6,000 and has remained relatively steady since, which is roughly half the total annual energy use of a typical 2 to 3 bedroom house in the UK. So as you can see, they also had an unintended benefit there. So we can talk about the unintended negative consequences of retrofit, but we could also talk about the unintended positives, i.e. they got a really good acoustic reduction as well within that. So, I mean, it's a feel good. When done right, it can be a real feel good thing. And obviously making people feel more comfortable in their homes gives everyone a warm, rosy glow, and not just because they're not using as much gas. So we hope we haven't put you off there, and we hope we've given you some motivational stories of people who've come out of the other side of the retrofit process and are quite literally sitting pretty. So how can you go about getting into the wonderful world of retrofit? I'm going to hand over to my colleague Sandy, who will be able to guide you through. And
you can see that.
And again, if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section and we'll get round to you.
Thanks, Mark. Now that we've kind of like explored how retrofit is a bit different from standard construction projects, I wanted to talk about how you can get started in this kind of work if that's what you're looking to do. So the first thing I wanted to ask people is about whether you're currently being asked about retrofit work. So I'm just going to launch a quick poll, which hopefully people can see. And we've got 3 options on this poll. So we've got kind of no, I'm not being asked about it. No one's asking me about it. I haven't got much demand. I've got yes, but they aren't really sure what they want. That might be householders who don't know where to start, or it might be larger clients who need some guidance on a bigger project, or it might be yes, and they know exactly what they want. So I'll just give people a second to fill that in. We've got about half of you have filled that in now. Just really interesting to kind of see where people are at with this and if it aligns with what we're finding as well. So we've got a few more people left to answer. Great, we've got about 70% of you. So any last ones, and then I'll just end that so everyone can see it. So hopefully people can see that. So yeah, we had a mix of answers. We had some no's, some yes, and they know what they want, but the vast majority is people are being asked about this, but they aren't sure what they want. And I think that's kind of what we're finding as well, is that there is this growing demand for retrofit work, but there might be a bit of confusion about what exactly people want and where to start. So I'll kind of talk through a little bit about the demand and these opportunities for retrofit work, which might be familiar to some of you if you're already being asked about it. But the main thing is that this is a growing market. The net zero targets that we have in the UK, which are kind of legal obligations of the government, require 29 million homes to be retrofitted by 2050. Another part of this is energy standards increasing for rental properties, which is another driver for the retrofit market. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. As Mark said, something that's a big concern for our clients who are owner occupiers, but also for everyone at this stage, are the sharply rising fuel bills and the general increase in awareness around climate change as well. So when it comes to those EPCs, so an EPC is an energy performance certificate, and that C rating for rental properties, that's quite a big opportunity because only about between 40 and 50% of existing housing stock is currently rated EPC A through C, the highest ratings. And in England, if you look at properties by the type of property and also by the tenure, private rentals are kind of an area with the lowest energy efficiency scores. How that's going to pan out, we'll kind of see, but those different factors kind of segment the market into three different areas. So we have social housing that needs to be retrofitted. This usually takes place as multi-unit retrofit schemes. So it might be a whole batch of houses or a whole batch of flats. And as Mark mentioned, this is one area that money had kind of gone into in the past and had been sometimes done quite badly. Due to the way that it was procured, due to a lack of skills and training, and due to a lack of kind of quality. And that's where the PAS 2035 framework was developed in order to kind of drive this whole house approach to retrofit, which includes fabric first methodology, so applying that insulation, that ventilation, that air tightness. And it also defines different qualifications and responsibilities for retrofit roles. I'm going to talk a bit more about those when I talk about training and skills. But I think what's important is to understand that if this is the kind of work that you want to get into, and maybe you work at a large contractor, because they're multi-unit schemes, they're typically led by large contractors and working on with them. You need to think about the PAS 2035 roles. You need to think about compliance with that. And I'll talk a little bit about how you get there later today, but that's kind of one area of the market. Another area of the market is owner occupiers who are able and willing to pay. So People Powered Retrofit, we are a retrofit service, and that's kind of where we focus. It's a relatively accessible segment of the market because there is demand there. People who have the money and are also in a position to make changes to their own home because they own it, they do exist, and I'll give some numbers in a second. There are also some additional financial incentives. So for example, the boiler upgrades scheme, which gives £5,000 upfront to households for air source heat pump installations, but they have to have met a certain amount of EPC ratings and insulation and fabric criteria in order to gain that. So there is an incentive there. In terms of who can access this kind of work, this is more suited to businesses who are smaller, who are maybe already working with individual households on those other of the 4 R's that Mark mentioned. So maybe you're already working on individual household refurbishments or remodeling, or maybe you're working on renovations for individual households. So there's quite a sensible kind of link there to making retrofit part of what you can do there. And then the private rentals, I've mentioned the EPCs by 2025. The impact here kind of is a bit unknown still. I think whether landlords are going to kind of invest in their properties to improve them to meet the standards, or whether they're going to sell them, and how kind of that PAS 2035 process isn't necessarily required for private rentals. So how the quality of that works, we're kind of yet to see, but there should be kind of pressures on that market, kind of that, I guess, that that stick rather than that carrot in terms of getting properties to that level, or you won't be able to rent them out in just a few years' time. So I think some of the numbers around retrofit demand and some of the kind of demand can be a little bit abstract. So I wanted to just give a bit of a case study. And because we're based in Greater Manchester, I've kind of focused on Greater Manchester, but there's similar and also different stories all around the UK. So here are just some of the headlines around what the demand is looking like in Manchester and Greater Manchester. So on the left-hand side, we've got a retrofit service. So Greater Manchester Combined Authority has launched their own retrofit service. It gives people advice, it helps them do assessments, it kind of points them to different things. I haven't got any numbers for that, but I know it only launched a couple months ago, and it'll be good to keep an eye on how that progresses. People Powered Retrofit have a householder-based service as well, which is aimed at individuals. And this year, since the start of January, we've had over 100 inquiries, and we kind of are constantly kept quite busy with the amount of inquiries we get, and we get them from outside of Greater Manchester as well. In terms of investment by the Combined Authority, they're investing £78 million to upgrade publicly owned buildings, and they're looking at a number that I find makes more sense for me is this number of 60,000 homes every year retrofitted in Greater Manchester. That's just like more digestible for me than 29 million by 2050. And there's a commitment there, not only from the Combined Authority where we are, but also from individual local authorities. So we've got a retrofit strategy from Manchester City Council with different projects that have been funded, including a £3 million pilot scheme by a housing association called One Manchester to receive full retrofit on 90 properties and 70% of those with heat pumps. There's also a group called Withenshaw Community Housing Group, which received £800,000 to retrofit 150 homes, raising their band up to EPCC. And there's also been a £5 million scheme in Salford to upgrade public buildings, which started at the end of last year. So there is this commitment in that kind of public sector and from housing associations as well. A big part of that has been the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. So you can see there's 12 different housing associations in Greater Manchester, and there's 50 across the UK that were successful in round 1, and round 2 is now open. So there's going to be more of these funded projects to decarbonise social housing, all of that falling under the PAS 2035 framework. And I think also thinking about the work that's being funded and the demand for the actual retrofit work, it's also important to think about the investment in building demand and also building the kind of skills. Like Mark said, a big problem with previous retrofit works has been a lack of skilled contractors, designers, anyone in the kind of construction supply chain. So a couple of things there are the skills academy, the Retrofit Skills Academy, that was a combination of different local providers and national providers here in Manchester to put on something called the Low Carbon Academy that offered free training to people in Manchester, and I know they're kind of looking to renew that again. Also, big investment in different green skills centres. So for example, in Bolton, there's a big green skills centre that's being developed. And I think really something that's really beneficial for owner occupiers, but also all different people, is this fact that GMCA, the Combined Authority, are working with the Green Finance Institute to pilot different innovative ways of financing retrofit. So that's anything from green mortgages to property-linked finance agreements and local climate bonds. They're trialing a bunch of different approaches to try and stimulate demand. I think we kind of think at People Powered Retrofit that finances alone don't create demand, but what it can do is if someone's thinking about doing some work and then some funding can help them do something that's a deeper retrofit, it's a more considered retrofit, or just give a bit of more, have a bit bigger impact, then that can be really beneficial. So I know not everyone's from Greater Manchester, but it's just, I find sometimes looking at a smaller scale than the national level can bring that picture of the demand into focus a little bit more. So thinking about who can be involved in retrofit, there's a number of different roles, and some of these come from the PAS 2035 framework. There's roles across the kind of process of retrofit. So before a retrofit starts, you need people with surveying skills, energy evaluation skills, and design skills to kind of assess where the building is at, make a plan to change it, and develop some specifications for the work that needs to be done. During construction, you need general repair and maintenance. That's a really important first step, so that before you put anything new onto the building, you deal with any disrepair or any concerns about the quality of the building so far. You also need project management for supervising the retrofit program and managing risk, which is such a key part of retrofit, and coordinating all of the different people who are involved. And then you need tradespeople with specific skills to implement measures like draft proofing, insulation, or heat pump installation. So like there's these kind of specialist retrofit installers, but then there's also general tradespeople skills that both are needed. It's not just specialists. And then after a retrofit project is constructed, you also need to be able to evaluate how well it's worked and do quality assurance. So evaluation is also a skill. For some of these roles, there are specific training qualifications and certifications out there. So I'm going to go through some of those. So I'm not going to spend like ages on this because we will send out a recording, we will send out the slides, but for retrofit advisor roles, which is maybe the first person that someone might come to when they're looking for a retrofit, there's a level 3 certificate in this that's available. For retrofit assessors, you essentially need a domestic energy assessor qualification first. That's an entry level qualification, and then that can help you get into either a PAS 2035 accredited retrofit assessor training, which might be linked to a scheme that's Trustmark approved, or you could do something like the level 4 award in retrofit assessment that's currently offered by the Retrofit Academy, and that's something just a little bit more involved. Also, if you're going to be working on older and traditional buildings, which a lot of the housing stock that needs to be retrofitted in the UK is older and traditional. We have very old housing stock. If you're going to be working on projects like that as a retrofit assessor, or maybe even as a coordinator, which I'll come on to, then this level 3 award in energy efficiency for older and traditional buildings is offered at a few places and is actually mandatory under PAS 2035 for certain levels of risk in a project. So those are all kind of qualifications that exist already. For retrofit coordinators, there is a level 5 diploma in retrofit coordination and risk management that's accredited. And I also just wanted to mention, of course, that's not an accredited course, but is like very, very thorough, which is called the AECB Carbon Light Retrofit Coordination course. You can do it just as the foundational course or plus a retrofit coordinator add-on. But that is very helpful, especially for people who haven't worked in buildings before, who want to get into retrofit coordination to kind of understand the technical side of retrofit. And it was authored by one of the people who was a technical writer on the PAS 2035 project. When it comes to designers, there's different types of qualification and training that you need. If you're going to be installing or designing, if you're going to be designing a single measure, you might be able to get specialist training or qualifications just in that one measure, for example, heat pumps or external wall insulation. If you are looking at solar or heat pumps, then the MCS certification is what you need in order to design those. And if you're designing something that involves combustion appliances, then gas safe and oil CPS is needed. But for other things, those professional memberships that are listed on the slide or passive house designer qualifications are also available. And then for installers, like I said, there are some specific sort of retrofit installation certification. So if you're installing a heat pump or battery storage or wind, then the MCS certification is what you need to look at. There's also then a level 2 award in understanding domestic retrofit, which kind of introduces the principles of retrofit. That's something that's being offered at a number of awarding bodies and different colleges and things like that. But the main way that people are getting trained up to be retrofit installers at this point is through existing NVQs on topics like fenestration, insulation, roofing. Those skills are quite transferable, and another part of this is thinking about having this multidisciplinary approach where people can understand how different systems in the building work together. So maybe having multiple NVQs or multiple aspects of the trades all within one person or within a team will help you kind of get into retrofit as well. Aside from those sort of qualifications, and those were mostly, qualifications and certifications, there's a lot of training and a lot of information out there from industry bodies, from suppliers, and from other organizations. I've just listed a few on here who are kind of based all around the UK. Some of these organizations might offer free training, some of them have paid courses, some of them might do bespoke training. But if you need training on a particular system, if you're a tradesperson or if you're a designer and you need a system training, the system provider might be able to provide it. But we'll send out this slide with all these links, and I think it's important to kind of back up those qualifications with some more training that's maybe more specific to the types of properties you're looking at or the really specific systems you're going to be using, because best practices are always changing and always kind of, you have to keep on top of them. And like I said, some people who get into retrofit might be coming from scratch. There are some roles that you might be a brand new entrant to retrofit, maybe you're coming from another profession, but you can always build on your existing skills as well. So for people who have a trade already, boosting your retrofit credentials can involve having one or more other trades in a multidisciplinary approach. Something I haven't included here is there was an article about an organization in Manchester called B for Box, who were really talking about how this multidisciplinary approach really helps them on retrofit projects. So I'll see if I can send that out afterwards. But also soft skills are important. Data management, customer service, and project management are things that are really in demand. And if you're looking to get into retrofit work and you have those skills, that can also help you to get into this sector. It's also a way that maybe if you want to develop those skills and you've been working in the trades, or if you want to transition away from kind of working on site, then those skills with like project management and data management and evaluation could be things that you could add on top of your construction expertise. A couple of final points before I wrap up. I know I'm going over, there's just so much to talk about. I think linking up demand with kind of who's there in the supply chain, I think it makes sense to think of retrofit as an extension of the repair, maintenance, and improvement cycle. Like Mark was saying, there's these 4 R's, and most retrofit projects will include renovation, it will include maintenance, and it will include improvements to the house or the property in some other way. And as long as there's a plan, as long as there's a quality plan and an assessment of the property, there's no reason why retrofit can't be a regular part of the work that we do to maintain buildings. This is in the building regulations. Part L of the building regulations stipulates that if you're going to renovate a thermal element of a building, so maybe you're taking all the plaster off an external wall internally, under the building regulations, you have to improve the thermal performance of that element. However, there's not a lot of awareness about this, both within the trades, but also within building control, and also from householders or other clients who are getting this work done. But awareness of this makes it a lot more feasible to start making retrofit quite a regular part of what you can do, how you can add more value, and how you can make sure that you're compliant in the work that you're doing. So I think it's important for us to think about how we can make retrofit part of our regular work as well. If you are interested in getting into retrofit work and you want a bit more inspiration, want to understand what that might look like, we have some fact sheets on our website from people who have either transitioned from working in the trades to specifically working in retrofit, or maybe they've come from outside of retrofit completely and had a career change. And this gives a little bit of information about how that's worked for them. And last thing before we have a quick break, the Retrofit Academy are currently doing some work. They haven't asked me to share this, but I just think it's really good. They're doing a consultation paper on retrofit career pathways, because there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on making these career pathways really clear for people, making them accessible, and making them inviting so that people come and work in this industry. So if you have any thoughts on that, I'll put this link in the chat and we'll send it out afterwards, but have a look at this and respond to the consultation if you can, because it would be great to have more different voices in there about how we can get people working in retrofit. Okay, we're going to have a quick break, just a couple minutes for me to catch my breath. So while we're on a break, I thought if you could pop in the chat any responses to these questions. We're just interested in what barriers there are for you into getting into retrofit. I guess we also saw that a big one was maybe people not being sure about what they want. But anything else that's sort of a barrier or a challenge for you, and then anything that might help you overcome those barriers or challenges. So I think we'll just take maybe like 2 or 3 minutes for me and Mark to have a quick break, and then we'll come back, summarize this, and then go through the Q&A. Does that sound good with you, Mark?
Yep, sounds good to me. We do have a few questions to go over, and obviously, I'm sure we'll have a few things to go over in the chat regarding barriers about getting into retrofit. So we'll leave it with you, and we'll see you very shortly.
Great.
Right, we're back. Yes, I'm going to give Sandy's vocal cords a quick break because she's been hard at it for the last 20-25 minutes.
I think there's been some good chat in the chat, though. I've been seeing it, and yeah, I think some really interesting barriers. I think some points about kind of people not knowing that there are jobs and people not knowing that there's things there. I think that's really important. I'll put the link to that Retrofit Academy consultation in the chat, because I think that's something they're working on trying to develop. We're also, People Powered Retrofit's working in partnership with some organisations in Manchester on green skills, and we're trying to make these things more appealing and spread the word about them as well. That kind of basic lack of understanding of what retrofit is from individuals. I'd be interested, Lindsay, in whether that's from householders, from people in the trades, from people in other parts of the industry, or everyone. I think that there is that awareness raising that needs to happen, but it'd be interesting to know where exactly. And I think thinking about don't recognize qualification in retrofit and making sure you invest in the right course. Yeah, I think that can be quite difficult. I mean, there aren't that many like qualifications that are, for example, for retrofit designers, there aren't that many that will give you that qualification for past 2035 work. So if you want to get into that kind of work, there's maybe more clear options. But yeah, I think we have a network of people who work in the supply chain here at People Powered Retrofit, and I can send that in the follow-up. So if you want to join that and maybe chat to other people who are already working in the industry who have some thoughts about different courses and things, then that could be good.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on one from where is it? Oh, sorry, I'm just going down there. Yeah, Ariba Rashid, a barrier that we've come across. People don't know what jobs there are waiting for them in the retrofit stroke green economy. It's been a perennial issue, unfortunately. You know, it is an issue sort of from high on above, really, a lack of a coherent policy maybe from the powers that be. That's been the case for a long time. I personally got into the job at the entry level, domestic energy assessor, back in 2015. I also studied as a Green Deal advisor, and lo and behold, I think a month or two after I qualified as a Green Deal advisor, the Green Deal was scrapped. So and as a result of that, I know a lot of companies went to the wall, insulation companies and things. So people are right to be a little bit nervous about it. However, I think we're now at a tipping point where you know, the acknowledgement is there that like there is a huge program of this work needs to happen. It's a question of when, in terms of like on a governmental level, but as we're talking on a local council level, like with GMCA and what have you, that you know, there is work around people, and with the Wythenshawe Community Housing Group, another one. Obviously, these are local examples, however, they are being repeated throughout the country. So I think, you know, we are getting to the point now where there is a bit of a sea change in the direction. So those, you know, those jobs and those qualifications, they are there now, and they will be becoming more and more, you know, as time goes by. So I think just have faith. I mean, obviously with the local authorities and things going down the past 2035 route, retrofit assessors like Mohammed, for instance, probably well worth you looking in with housing associations, local authorities. I know that Eon, I think it was some years ago, they were quite ahead of the curve, especially for the energy companies getting assessors in as well. So there are the opportunities out there, and there are, you know, sort of like steady, reliable jobs to be had, which may not have been the case all the time.
And I think just before we get into, we'll take some of the questions from the Q&A panel, but in terms of proving to people that there is demand for it and supporting them with that, one-stop shops have a big role to play. So People Powered Retrofit, we're a kind of one-stop shop for retrofit, we have a householder service where we do assessments all the way through to design, to evaluation, and we kind of support people along that. We also offer training, and we also offer a network of support for the supply chain, and we're trying to build a directory, because I see those points about finding installers and companies with the right values and the trained staff. So that's what we're trying to do, is like find those people or train up those people. And this is a model that is being replicated around the country, and is something that's being started up in different ways all around the country. So like the Your Home Better in Manchester is another one. There's ones in Bristol, there's ones in Devon, there's ones in London, Glasgow, and hopefully more and more. So I think joining up the dots between those things is also really important. But let's make sure we get through people's questions. I think
Yeah.
I have one for you, Mark, and keep it brief, but are EPC assessments fit for purpose? Is any improvement coming from Brendan?
I wouldn't know, Brendan, in all honesty. It's been a while since I've been in the wonderful world of EPCs, and so I don't really keep abreast of all the industry news. It's a bit of a lottery, unfortunately. It depends on what assessor you get. Is the simple answer to that. It's very difficult to standardise it all, obviously. I mean, the training is the training. But people work at different levels and in different ways. So unfortunately, it is a bit of a risk. We personally, obviously, here we take EPC data with a pinch of salt, and obviously I'm lucky enough to be able to go out having sort of like trained up as a retrofit assessor to pass 2035 standard, and then also trained up to sort of like for our software that we work with. So it's I wouldn't like to say either way, in all honesty. I'm going to sit quite on the fence in that one.
Very diplomatic. David asked if there were any local authorities offering financial assistance to owner occupiers other than through the boiler upgrade scheme. So all I can feedback on that is something from Manchester. So I know through the Your Home Better program, one of the things they're looking to do is provide financial assistance through partnerships. I don't know the details of it very much. I know that they're looking at helping with solar, for example, and getting financial assistance with that. But as far as different local authorities around the country, I'm not sure. But I think the work that the Green Finance Institute are doing with Greater Manchester Combined Authority is something to keep an eye on, to see on like how that develops, because I think again that's something that could definitely be replicated in other places.
I'd like to take another David's questions, if that's all right, Sandy. In terms of, he was asking, is there any evidence that the retrofit market is creating new green jobs? And I think we did answer that before, from the chat going on about the different initiatives that are going on for, through various different local authorities, housing associations, etc. So yeah, it's starting off small, but it will gain momentum as time goes by.
Then David asked again about converting an empty 3-bed council-owned house into a retrofit show home in South London, and does anyone have experience of doing this, or know if there's one elsewhere in the country? So I know that there are homes that there's events all around the country called Green Open Homes, I believe, where it's not just a show home, it's someone's actual home, but they do events where people open up their homes to the public to come have a look around. So I think it's called Green Open Homes. If you look that up, then you might be able to find things about that. But if you're thinking of just a show home, I think one thing to look up might be heat pump show homes. Let me just check who does them, because I was looking at this recently. I think it's Nesta. Yes. So let me pop that in the chat. So Nesta are doing a project with show homes for heat pumps to like help people kind of demystify them and break down some of the stereotypes or some misinformation people might have. So it's not necessarily a retrofit show home, but obviously heat pumps might be part of what you're thinking of. So that's maybe something worth looking at. I know they're piloting that right now, and part of it will be in London, so possibly worth looking at.
Could I also expand on that point regarding the show home as well? We've at People Powered, we have actually helped retrofit ex-council homes in the past, and we've got a project on the go at the moment. Just worth checking out what construction type it is. Some of the ex-council stock in Manchester especially is what's known as non-standard construction, so it's like almost prefabricated buildings. So if you've got the property already, I'd have a good look into how it was made, because that will obviously influence how you're going to go about tackling it.
Great. Let me see if there's one or two more we can answer before we have to finish up. So we've got a couple questions from people who've done some training. So we've got Paul, who's done some training, future-proof course with the Green Register, and MSc in Green Building at CAT, but not sure about the next step. And then we've also got a a couple of other questions about kind of where to go next. I think in terms of where to go next, if it's in terms of training, you could get in touch with me, to be honest, and I might be able to point you in a few directions. If it's in terms of getting work or developing your business, I think thinking about talking to some of our team who are on the supply chain development side of things might be good. So I'll put a link in the chat to our sort of sign up form for information about our network. That might be somewhere you can go. I think it kind of depends, I guess, like what kind of work you want to get into. So I know that there's a really big gap in the market for kind of career advice that is centered on retrofit. That's something that's becoming even clearer from this discussion and this webinar. So yeah, maybe have a look on there. There might be someone we can point you to who can help you out and chat to you. And if you have any questions about training, you can contact me. I'll put my email in the chat later. Right, can we take one more question before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'm just trying
Maybe
to.
Brendan asks, you can see if you can answer this one, Mark. Have technical understanding and available materials reached a point of development that householders can be confident that future horror stories will be avoided?
Well, again, I think a bit of fence sitting is in order on this one. It very much depends. Again, it's the luck of the draw. It depends on who you get out to do it. I mean, it's probably worth looking at an organisation similar to us, if you know, depending on where you are in the country, obviously. Just because we obviously deal quite closely with contractors who we know to work to a high level and to, you know, sort of like just detail the work correctly, that kind of thing. I mean, there's no foolproof way of doing it. The devil is in the detail in retrofit, and you do require, you know, the best people to come along and do that. Unfortunately, it's not just anything. You can't just go along and stick something on the wall. There's quite a lot to it. So it's yes and no. I'm afraid if I can be any more vague than that.
I think, yeah, I think like Mark says, I think technical understanding is there and available materials there's some amazing things out there, but I guess it's just a case of scaling that up and providing that independent kind of person, whether that's a retrofit coordinator, whoever that is, to ensure that things are done kind of in that best way. And I think there's been a lot of work done in the industry to develop those standards, and now it's just a case of kind of implementing them. Right, we've got a couple minutes left, and thank you all so much for your questions. Sorry if we didn't get to yours today. I'll make a note of all of them so that hopefully if people follow up, then we can answer them another time.